Thank you, Elko, and thank you, JC. I am so excited to be here and to see all of you and to see the beautiful mountains as I came in on this gorgeous sunny day. You probably know we've been in a lot of snow, and you know snow around here, but it's been just great to be in Nevada with so many good friends. And I wanted to specifically also mention Jeff Tracy. Where are you, Jeff? Our super volunteer that's been helping us out. Thank you for that. And then also, I know you heard from Steve Anderson, your ALCO chair. Thank you, Steve. And thanks for your good work as chair. So we have been all over the place and pretty excited about our campaign and how it's going. I think a lot of people didn't think I'd make it through that snowstorm in my announcement, but I wanted to impress ALCO. And then I think some people predicted that we wouldn't make it through the summer and then the debate stage, but we have done more than that and are surging all over the country. And it wouldn't have happened without regular people actually giving me a chance. Because I don't quite have the name identification, as you know, of some of the people in the race. I certainly don't have the bank account of some of the people in the race. But what's happened to us is just one by one through speeches and these public events and the debates, regular people have just started helping me in a big, big way. And we raised $12 million since the New Hampshire debate in that first week, just online. And that has really helped us to run ads throughout Nevada, and it's helped us to build our staff. We already had a good core staff here that we'd hired who had worked with Beto O'Rourke, so that was good. And so they were on board. We had an office, but now we've been able to add people, and so that's been really, really great. Is that a Green Bay Packer hat you have on? Okay, a little distracting for me, a Viking fan, but it's a real nice welcome. Thank you so much. A Skoll is right. Okay. My dad used to be a journalist. He's now 91, but he covered the Vikings. And he once wrote a book in the early 90s, this is a true story, called Will the Vikings Ever Win the Super Bowl? And it is sadly still relevant today. So I actually woke up, I saw how someone had sent out a tweet, a reporter who I knew from way back, and said, why is she going to this town with this small population today? And I said, you don't get me. And what I'm about is actually not leaving stones unturned and about not representing just half of America, but representing all of America. And to me, that means going not just where it's easy to get to, going not just where it is always comfortable, but where it's uncomfortable. I go to a lot of Republican areas. I go to a lot of areas that are rural. In my own state, I have 87 counties, and I visited all of them last year and year before last and every year before that since I've been running. And for me, that's been really important. And especially in smaller communities and farming communities, it's a way to get to know people, but it's a way to understand the issues so you do a better job representing people. So my background, which is a lot different than Donald Trump's, he has, and I can't wait to say this on the debate stage, because in the course of his life, he got $413 million from his dad. That was his family trust. This is my story. My grandpa worked 1,500 feet underground in the iron ore mines. I know you have mining here, and he worked 1,500 feet underground in the mines. And he had 9 brothers and sisters. He was the oldest boy. His parents got sick. They died when they were very young. And his youngest sister, Hannah, was 8 years old, and she had to be brought to an orphanage in Duluth. And he vowed he would go get her. And he borrowed a car and brought her back after 2 years. And he and my grandma helped raise those kids as well as their 2 sons. Of course, my dad was one of them. And because back then the mines were really unsafe, the underground mines, and unions helped, and they started to get the mines safer and safer, because my dad actually still remembers the coffins in the Catholic Church of the miners. I would always hear the stories of my grandma when the siren would go off. Everyone would run to the mine because they didn't know whose dad or whose son or whose brother was hurt or killed. And over time, those mines got safer. And, yep. And they got safer, and they got safer. And my grandpa then was able to save money in a coffee can in the basement of his little house, and he saved enough money to send my dad to a 2-year community college called Vermilion Community College, which is actually, because of the Iron Range in Minnesota, it used to be Ely Junior College, and now it's Vermilion. And so my dad got a degree from there, and then he went to the University of Minnesota, and that's when he became a journalist. And then my mom grew up in Milwaukee, which is going to be the site of our national convention. Where are you from? There you go. Yeah, these Wisconsin people are just everywhere. So she grew up in Milwaukee, and she wanted to be a teacher, and she moved to Minnesota, and she ended up teaching second grade until she was 70 years old. And I still meet people who said she was their favorite teacher, and her favorite thing she taught was the monarch butterfly unit. And she would, the butterfly would burst out of its cocoon, and then she'd release it. And the day that always happened, she would dress up in a butterfly outfit with antennas and a tunic and tights and a sign that said "To Mexico or Bust," because of where the butterflies would go. And so I never knew why she would always go grocery shopping in that outfit. She said it was funny. After school she would go until she died. And at her visitation, this mother came over to me with her older son, who was pretty disabled, and he was standing there, and the mother was sobbing, and I couldn't understand. I didn't know what was going on. And finally the mom says, "This is my son, and your mom was his favorite teacher. She was his second grade teacher. And when he graduated from high school, he would still talk about the monarch butterfly unit, because that was his favorite thing. And when he graduated, he got a job at this supermarket, which he usually didn't go to, bagging groceries." And the mom said every single year for a decade, when your mom would teach that butterfly unit, she would keep that outfit on, and she would go to his grocery store, that's why she went, and stand in his line with her groceries and give him a big hug. That is my mom. So I stand before you. I stand before you today as a granddaughter of an iron ore miner, as the daughter of a teacher and a newspaperman, as the first woman elected to the U.S. Senate from the state of Minnesota, and a candidate for President of the United States. And that is because we live in a country of shared dreams, that no matter where you come from or who you know or the color of your skin or where you worship or who you love, that you can make it in the United States of America. And that's really fundamentally why I'm running for this job, because I see this president who wakes up every morning trying to somehow put a dent into that dream for someone, right? He goes after immigrants. He goes after people of color. It seems impossible for him to put himself in the shoes of others. He made a bunch of promises to people, and I get really focused on this because in my state, actually, a lot of people stayed home in 2016, especially in rural areas. They didn't vote. Hillary barely won. She won by a lot more in Nevada, which Harry Reid always liked to point out to me. She actually had her lowest percentage of any state in the country where she won. So I knew a lot of people that stayed home or voted for Donald Trump or voted for someone else in the race. So I think about that a lot, especially being from the Midwest, where we have those states like Pennsylvania, which, by the way, there was a poll yesterday that showed me 7 points ahead of Donald Trump. The most, actually. The most of anyone except the vice president, who was 1 point more. So that was pretty cool, given he has a lot of connections to Pennsylvania. And then Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, those states that we didn't win. And I actually went on a tour of those states and met with dock workers in Michigan and dairy farmers in Wisconsin and carpenters in Pennsylvania. And I came up with a big plan, and that was that we are going to build a beautiful blue wall of votes around those states of Democrats and independents and whole coalition of people and some moderate Republicans. We're going to build this blue wall around those states, and we're going to make Donald Trump pay for it. So that is my big plan when it comes to that. But through all that and through thinking about this a lot, I realized there are a lot of people out there that we need to reach out to. And I don't think you necessarily reach out to them with a slugfest at a debate, honestly. There are a bunch of people tuning in that didn't know much about the candidates for the first time. And I'm hoping we can focus more on the issues in the next one. And I would have personally liked to talk about Nevada. And you have no idea how much I wanted to talk about rural Nevada, since I'm the only one up there on the Agriculture Committee. I'm the only one up there that asked to be on the Agriculture Committee. I'm the only one that has negotiated as a senior member now 3 farm bills. I'm the only one when it comes to, do I know that cattle is a big deal around here? Maybe. I am the only one that that didn't happen when I was in Vegas and talked about cattle. Just amazing. But I'm the only one. I actually led with Senator Cornyn of Texas a bill for a vaccine bank as we look at hoof and mouth disease and H1N1 for hogs, which is a big deal in my state, and avian flu for poultry, and some of these diseases that have come our way, and being ready for the next one because of the devastation, as we know, or because some countries then closed down their markets. I worked a lot when we were having trouble way back, this was like a decade ago, with South Korea and some of the other countries, Japan, in not allowing the beef in for various reasons, and making sure that we have strong arguments that they can take our beef, so you can't have faux arguments about not taking it. And I'll get to all that in a minute, but just having someone that knows those agriculture issues is going to be really, really important, and understanding that people were promised a lot of things. Prosperity for a lot of people. If you can't get housing, like an issue around here for a lot of people when you need workers, or you can't get child care, or you have trouble getting health care, because we know that in rural areas it's not one size fits all when it comes to health care and education. So I think that's really important. And a lot of people that I've talked to, they say, you know, when things go wrong for me because of the trade war or because of something else, I've just got to work harder. And when things go wrong for him, he just blames other people all the time. He's kind of like he whines. You have that image of him yelling at the press in front of that helicopter, the thing whirring around. And I have collected this litany of people that he blames, right? He blames Barack Obama all the time when things go wrong. He blames the head of the Federal Reserve that he appointed. He blames the generals that he commanded. He blames the entire country of Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark. That was one of my favorite ones. And because I kept saying that in New Hampshire, I had this cult of Danes with flags that would follow me around. It was a very strange thing. And then my favorite one recently is that he blamed the Prime Minister of Canada for cutting him, Donald Trump, out of the Canadian version of Home Alone 2. That is a true story. So I think that you've got to, when you think about all this, you think, what could the alternative be? Well, the alternative has to be an optimistic economic agenda for the people of this country that gets at some of these things that I just talked about. And the other part of this is to remember, for a number of citizens out there, including maybe some people in this room, they don't agree with everything that's said on that debate stage. I don't agree with everything that's said on that debate stage. But what they do agree with is that we need to bring some decency back, that this election is a decency check, so that when the president is on TV, when the president is on TV at a rally, okay, just went after me. I was in Colorado last night in Aurora and did an event, and then I found out he was going after me not too far away in the same state. I'm like, wow, I must be doing well now, because this is like, he didn't even mention me when he went to my own state every year. They don't want to have a president, people don't, where if their kids walk in the room and he happens to be on TV, that they have to mute the volume because they don't know what he's going to say. And I'm sure many of you remember the days. I remember my parents would have us watch a president when they were on TV, even if they hadn't voted for that president or didn't really agree with them. They thought that that was important as part of our civic. People see this as a patriotism check, especially those who served. And, you know, they see a president that stands next to Vladimir Putin at the G20, and when someone asks about Russian interference in our election, and you know this recently was coming up yesterday and the day before with the reports of more attempts at Russian interference, what does he do when he's asked about it? He makes a joke about it to Vladimir Putin. When you think about it, hundreds of thousands of Americans have lost their lives in the battlefield standing up for democracy. Our democracy and other democracies. That's what World War II was about. Thousands of people in this patriotic state have lost their lives standing up for democracy. 4 little girls at the height of the civil rights movement lost their lives simply because they were in that church and they wanted to be part of that democracy. They were innocents, and other people were trying to push it away from them. So many of our country's best moments and our worst moments have been about democracy, and he makes a joke about it. So I always want us to remember that because, and I don't think it's hard for you to remember it in this community because you know the people I'm talking about, but I remember a guy that I met who was a cattle rancher. I've told the story all over the country, and I can finally tell it in a cattle ranching area. I just want you to know I'm not like sucking up to you and telling you this story. I tell it everywhere, don't I, you guys? Where's our team? Yes, yes, yes. I told it everywhere in New Hampshire. There's someone who was there. So this guy had taken me on a tour of his cattle ranch, and we were on his ATV, and we were dodging these big cows, and I thought, this is not how I want to die, honestly. I'm like, whoa! And then we go into his ranch house, and everyone leaves, the media leaves, and he says, you know, we voted for Trump. And he says like that. And I said, what do you mean we? Did your family, the ranchers who I'd just been with? And he said, no, I mean me, I did. He said, I just don't like to talk about myself that much. And so I say we. And he said, so we did that because we were mad about health care. And then he said, but then we saw him standing in front of the wall. And I said, no, the wall is not really built. And he said, no, the CIA wall. And this guy remembers when the day after the inauguration, when the president gave a partisan speech in front of this sacred wall that's covered in the stars of CIA agents that lost their lives in the line of duty for our country. They're anonymous. They don't even say their names. And so that's why that's such an important place for their families. And he gave this partisan speech about the size of his crowd at the inauguration in front of this wall. And this guy remembers. And then he remembers a Boy Scout jamboree when he gave a partisan speech there because he had been a Boy Scout. And so he said to me, that was just it for me. And that's when I decided what I did for me, he says, it wasn't patriotic. So we've got to remember those voters out there as we head into this election. And I believe that we want to build a big coalition because it's our fired up Democratic base, yes, but it's also bringing people with us that are independents or people that stayed home or moderate Republicans that want to come along with us that just can't stomach this anymore, that understand that the heart of this country is bigger than the heart of the guy in the White House. So that's number one. Number two is what this agenda is about as we look at how we're going to bring people with us. Well, we know healthcare that I've mentioned is a big part of that. Now, there's a lot of different proposals out there. Has anyone seen the debates about that? I personally think that the best way to do this is to focus on bringing premiums down. I think the best way to do that with the nonprofit public option. There's a lot of other ideas out there. I look at this practically, that the Affordable Care Act was really hard to pass, and it meant that people aren't going to get kicked off their insurance, but there's still a lot of problems with it. So how do we fix it? Well, I don't think we should blow it up. I think we should build on it. And so that's the first thing that you do. I think the second thing is taking on pharmaceutical companies and pharmaceutical prices in a big way. They have gone out of control. Just so you know, you wonder about why has this happened? It's really pretty straightforward. There are 2 pharmaceutical lobbyists for every member of Congress. And before I got there, actually, they got a provision written into law for Medicare, which affects not just seniors because it's the biggest purchasing block we have, 45 million people in our country. They got a provision written into law that says that Medicare cannot negotiate less expensive drug prices for 45 million seniors. Medicaid can, by the way, the VA can, but Medicare cannot. And so that's why I drafted a bill. I have 30-some co-sponsors now. As president, I can get it done. That just erases those words. And that would mean that Medicare could negotiate for less expensive drug prices. That's number 1. Number 2, bringing in less expensive drugs from other countries. That is a bill I had with my friend that I miss very much, John McCain, and specifically focused on Canada, because in Minnesota we can see Canada from our porch, and we see those less expensive drug prices. So McCain and I had that bill together. Now Chuck Grassley has stepped in and has that bill with me. I know I can get this done. Bernie and I teamed up and had a vote on this once at midnight, and but it was just kind of part of a budget vote. But we got 14 Republican senators to vote on. They might not have noticed what was happening, but we did. And so I found out that you can actually do this yourself as a president if you get a waiver. And it's one of the 137 things that I found out that we put in a list that a president can do in the first 100 days without Congress that are legal. But people just have not pushed the envelope to take on the pharma companies. And so you see these skyrocketing prices for insulin. You see problems for everything from EpiPens on, and that is the reason. So I'm actually really excited to work on this. Addiction and mental health. You know that this is not just a problem in the big cities. It's a problem right here in this county. And I have an extensive plan that for both things, because we're going to get a bunch of money in from this opioid settlement. And part of our problem is opioid addiction, but there's still meth, alcoholism. There's still huge issues with mental health, where 1 in 5 people in America deal with mental illness sometime in their life. And we do not have enough help in Nevada, especially in our rural areas. So for me, this is personal. My dad struggled with alcoholism my whole life growing up. By the time my husband and I got married, my dad had his 3rd DWI. And then the judge said to him, that's it, you got to decide treatment or jail. And he chose treatment. And in his words, he was pursued by grace, and it changed his life. And now at age 91, he is sober. He is in assisted living. His AA group still visits him there. And in his words, it's hard to get a drink around here anyway. That's what he said about a year and a half ago. So I think everyone should have that same right to be pursued by grace. Really leading to the end of his story and where he is now, long-term care. And that's going to mean, especially in areas in rural America, strong Social Security, strong Medicaid, and there's a way we can keep Social Security much stronger by simply raising the payroll cap. It's at $133,000. You could put in a kind of a donut hole and have it start again at $250,000, where people pay in $250,000 in income, and you would actually keep it solvent for a long, long, long time. But there's more we should do than that, because we really haven't done anything when it comes to incentives to make it easier for people to stay in their homes, more housing, of course, like in areas like this, and then sometimes then seniors could live in town if they had a good place to live. That frees up stock, but you've got to be able to think of it as one big thing. Home health care workers, to make sure that people will get help if they stay in their home, because a lot of times they want to, making it easier to afford long-term care insurance. In my dad's case, he got that. I don't know why, but he did. That's what's keeping him in this house with 15 other people. He's really happy there, but it's going to end in exactly a year and a half, and then we go into his savings. He doesn't have as much as he should because he got married 3 times, but that's not a story we're going to go into right now at this thing. And then after that, then he's on Medicaid. And Catholic Elder Care said they would take him in because the place he's in now doesn't take that. And our story is actually better than a lot of other people's stories. And so that's why I am really devoted to this. And it's exciting, too. There's a lot of seniors that want to work part-time. There's some that want to volunteer, and you want to make it easier for people to do that. I brought that up at a meeting like this once, and these 2 women started to laugh. I go, why are you guys laughing? They go, oh, we're the opposite. We're working, and we want to retire. But I think understanding that there are so many challenges like Alzheimer's, which is going to be a major focus of mine, but there's also really cool things that we can do to harness all the energy we have out there with our senior population. That actually goes to the next thing, which is workforce training, and thinking of our education system and connecting it to our economy. And I know there's a lot of bumper sticker ideas out there, like free college for all. But my issue with it is that it's not going to get us where we really need to go. I want to make it easier, one, to pay back loans. And by the way, the best way you can do that right away in my first 100 days, no, my first 100 seconds, is to fire Betsy DeVos. Then there's this loan repayment program for teachers and public service people, and you could actually make that work better, and then you could extend it to in-demand occupations, which is a lot of things. There's a list of them, so that if people go into those areas, then you say, okay, we're going to get your loans, help you with your loans, and get them paid back. Think about what that would do. Or you could even do it for in-demand areas where you need more workers. It's actually a really cool idea. So that's one thing. The other is just investing in K through 12, and then those 1- and 2-year degrees, I would make those free. And then take the 4-year degrees. We're going to have a lot of job openings in those areas, and double the Pell Grants so that they go from $6,000 a year to $12,000, and that they cover families that make up to $100,000. Right now it's set at $50,000. I would pay for it by taking the capital gains rate and putting it closer to the personal income tax rate. That brings in like $500 billion. So why? We'll look at our economy right now, and I think you know in this area, we're going to have over 1 million openings for home health care workers and that in our nation that we don't know how we're going to fill. So we got to make sure that they're paid enough and there's child care and the like. We're going to have over 100,000 openings for nursing assistants. Those are 1- and 2-year degrees. We are going to have over 70,000 openings for electricians in our country. We are not going to have a shortage of sports marketing degrees. I know they're good. We are going to have a shortage of plumbers. And so it's creating incentives, and some of these jobs are very well paying. And, you know, creating incentives and upping how we look at certain jobs in the trades and the like, and in the ag economy that are in our economy. So we look at it a different way, and we get people to go into those jobs. By the way, that is the best baby I've ever had in an event. Over there, that is like the best baby. I know. Look at smiling over there. Okay, well, I guess everyone could have a baby like that. So anyway, so that's the whole thing with the economy and hooking it into our education system. Other challenges that we have: infrastructure, and you know this, and it's roads and bridges, it's water systems, it is rural broadband, and okay. So here's the deal. I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about this, but I'm on the Commerce Committee and the Ag Committee And so I've done a lot of work on rural broadband because of course, I have remote areas in my state, in the farm areas, as well as in northern Minnesota. And I once went to Iceland with my family on a vacation. My daughter always says, why do everywhere we go, you have to bring down coats in the summer? But we went there, and there are volcanoes everywhere in Iceland. It's beautiful, but there's these huge volcanoes, right? I want to know why they have high-speed internet everywhere in Iceland with their volcanoes, and they don't have it near Elko, okay? This makes no sense to me. So a lot of this is just putting it as a focus. And when I announced in the middle of that blizzard, it looked like some kind of Nordic festival out there, like we were in Iceland, I actually laid down the marker at my announcement. We can get access, high-speed access, internet access, as well as, by the way, cell phone service, which is a different issue, which you do, by 2022 to every household in America. We can. And there is money. I put together this $1 trillion infrastructure package, and I can tell you how I'm going to pay for it right now, and it will have a heavy emphasis on rural, of course, but rural broadband is a major piece of it. And that is actually really gettable, that we can do this. And it is, how I pay for it is this, the over $1 trillion. And it also includes water infrastructure, which you know how important that is. And a lot of times politicians don't want to go to those ribbon cuttings for water infrastructure, or they don't even have them because we don't have it, but it's really important, and sewer and the like. So how I pay for this $1 trillion is this. The first, when Trump signed that tax bill and he went down to Mar-a-Lago to celebrate, he literally said to his friends, you just got a lot richer, in this ballroom in Mar-a-Lago. So were any of you there? But the point is, I don't think anyone from this part of this state, or probably practically in Nevada, were in that room. Okay, well, maybe one or two. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about that. I don't know if he was there. Okay, so that's the point. And you take the corporate tax rate went down, and I favored bringing it down some, but it went from the mid-30s all the way down to 21%. And every point it went down was $100 billion. So if you take $400 billion, all you're doing is going from 21 to 25%. Not our rates. This is the corporate tax rate. That gets you $400 billion for infrastructure. Then if you take the international tax rate and you go back to it where it was under Obama, that is $150 billion right there. Then you take this idea called the Infrastructure Financing Authority to create incentives for investment from states and the likes, and that's already a bipartisan bill that Senator Warner, my friend from Virginia, has with Senator Blunt of Missouri, and there's a lot of support for that. You put that in place. That's hundreds of billions of dollars. And then Buy America Bonds, which is a proposal with Senator Wyden of Oregon and Senator Hoeven of North Dakota, which I guess looks a little like this, except you have beautiful mountains. And you combine that, and you get over $1 trillion right there. So there is just actually ways to do this. The president just doesn't want to deal with it. He should have done it with the tax bill. But now we're going to have to go back and take some of that money so we can plug it into infrastructure. Climate change, I think you see what's happening right in our midst with climate change and the warm weather. That is a whole bunch of things, but it's getting back into the International Climate Change Agreement and the gas mileage standards and the likes. It's sweeping legislation for energy efficiency, building a fridge to the next century. Yeah, I know it's bad. It's hard to make climate change jokes. I usually don't because people groan, but there is a way. So it's that energy efficiency, and then it's also putting a price on carbon somehow. And you can do it with something your legislature just did on that renewable electricity standard, which was very cool with your majority women legislature. So there is, and your new governor, I mean, there's just a lot going on. And so that's a part of that, but you could do it nationally, and then a bunch of money's going to come in. And we've got to make sure that money goes back to people for dividends if there's going to be changes with the cost of heating. We are well aware of that, your state, my state, and cooling. And so we've got to make sure that is airtight. I kept trying to explain that at the debate stage, and they cut me off. But you're not going to be able to pass it, much less have good public policy. And that's supported by a lot of the major groups out there, that we've got to make sure the money goes back to people, or we're not going to be able to get that climate change bill done. And then the other thing is using part of the money for incentives for jobs in areas that'll see some change. Some areas are going to see big new jobs, right? And then some areas aren't. And I always think about growing up in northern Minnesota, a combination of the mines, tourism, something you have around here, and small businesses opening and closing. It got so bad one year, and right now it's doing okay up there, but it got so bad that there was a billboard outside of Duluth that someone had taken out, and it said, "Last one to leave, turn off the lights." And so I think you know what I'm talking about here. So when we approach this incredibly important moment, because this president hasn't been doing anything on climate change, as we approach it, we've got to make sure that we do this in a way that it's going to allow people to still thrive, and that we're not going to hurt people, because we shouldn't. There is a way to do this, but we got to do it right and create the incentives for renewable energy and the like. So I actually think it's kind of an exciting thing for us to work on. So that's a tour through some of the work I've had. I obviously will have heavy emphasis as president of understanding rural America, as I've mentioned, and understanding that food doesn't magically show up on your table, and being able to bridge that gap because of growing up actually in the suburbs, but not too far away from the farms. When I was growing up, we were still on a dirt road. There were farms all around us. All my friends' relatives were farmers. Not as much cattle ranchers, but a little more dairy farmers and the like. So I'm going to have a heavy emphasis on that. So last thing I want to say is just that the one thing that unites us more than anything is that we have to win. And that is that we have to win. And I can't tell you how important that is. So here is my pitch. I am the one person up there on that section, but consistently won in rural and suburban areas and in red districts. I have won every single congressional district, every single Republican won, every single time, 3 times, including Michelle Bachmann's, okay? No one else can say that. And I have done it, as you know, by reaching out to people and bringing them with me. And I think not only is that how we win, it's also how we want to govern. So we can bring back some decency back into our government. So we can be a place where our incredibly brave and courageous veterans, when they come home, they've got a place where they've got a president, whether they supported that president or not, that people are proud of. That we are the beacon of democracy, again, around the world, that we work with our allies and side with innocents and allies instead of tyrants and dictators. That we are a country that just sees that this unity is so important, even though we have these divisions. And to me, that is going to bring in a lot of people. And I have shown I can do it over and over again. I've literally won every election I've ever run back to 4th grade. I say that because the guys on the stage boast a lot. Back when I won during elementary school, my slogan was something I've since abandoned, "All the way with Amy Kay." I didn't think that would be a good one, but that was what I had back then. I truly believe in grassroots politics, and it's why I have picked the color green for my color, not because of the Packers. I picked the color green because it was the color of one of my political mentors, Paul Wellstone. And he was someone, and not everyone's familiar with him, he was a U.S. Senator from Minnesota who ran a race against all odds, against a guy who was in the Senate who had a huge bank account. No one knew who he was, and he just got to work. And he would just run all around our state, literally in the parades. He'd run back and forth to meet everyone. He would talk really, really fast in his ads because he only had less money than his opponent, and he only had 30 seconds, and so he was going to talk really, really fast. And he miraculously, in this green bus, and our green bus now is down in Vegas, but going around in this green bus, he got elected. And he then served. He was up for election in his 3rd term, and he was going to win. And a few weeks before that, he was in a tragic plane crash in actually northern Minnesota in our mining area. going to a funeral of one of those miners, actually the guy that's funeral, his granddaughter, Ida Rukavina, now works for me up in northern Minnesota. And Paul was heading there with his wife Sheila, their daughter Marcia, their beloved staff, and that plane crashed in bad weather. Everyone in our state remembers where they were when that happened, but I always try to remember something else, and that's what I learned from him that year. He had told the state that he had MS, and so he couldn't run in those parades anymore. And I was running for re-election for local office. I had no opponent, which sounds really nice right now, and I was able to help him, and I got to watch what he did. He was in a lot of pain, and he couldn't run in those parades anymore. So instead, he would stand on the back of his bus in the parades, and he would just wave. But here's the amazing part. He had energized so many people in these green shirts to run around that bus, hundreds of people, that you didn't even notice he wasn't running himself. That's what grassroots politics is. It's about inspiring people to help you for a cause. And we have a big cause right now. We have a big mission right now to beat Donald Trump. And literally, our country depends on it. And our country depends on you. Because our democracy cannot handle 4 more years of a president that thinks he can bulldoze through it. Our rule of law, as we've seen in the last week, cannot withstand 4 more years of a president who thinks he's above it. Our American dream, as we think of this little baby and all of these people who in rural areas or are immigrants in the state, our American dream can't handle 4 more years of a president who thinks he can choose who lives it. So I'm asking you to run around that bus for me, not literally, like you don't, but I'm asking you to help me, to caucus for me. It is like 24 hours away, less than 24 hours, and help me out on this journey. The only reason that I keep going is because there's people like me out there who believe that we can do this. I told at the second to the last debate, when we had a little more time to talk instead of yell, and I told the story of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And when he died, he was so loved in our country that they put his body on a train that went from Georgia to Washington, and people spontaneously stood on the sides of the tracks to show their respect. And this reporter came upon a regular guy, who was sobbing. He had his hat in his hands, and the reporter said to him, "Sir, do you mind me asking, did you know the president?" And the guy says, no, I didn't know the president, but the president knew me. The president knew me. And so as I sat through that impeachment hearing, I thought a lot about this, is that our president doesn't have that empathy. He doesn't really put himself in the shoes of people who are facing hard times. And I can tell you this, if you are having trouble deciding if you're going to pay for child care for your kids or long-term care for your parents, I know you, and I will fight for you. If you're trying to figure out how you stretch that paycheck or your retirement to pay for your rent or your mortgage or for college for your kids or your grandkids, I know you, and I will fight for you. If you're trying to decide if you should fill your prescription for your prescription drugs or your refrigerator, I know you, and I will fight for you. And that's how I'll end it. I need your help. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Elko. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Wow.